This is the story of Yu Chan. His life was perfectly normal until one day something happened that turned his entire world upside down. Now, it remains to be seen what exactly lies ahead for him. The story begins with a night scene where countless spears are raining down rapidly from the sky. A group of knights is attacking a white-haired boy, calling him a demon. This white-haired boy, dressed in a black coat, is swiftly dodging their strikes. Suddenly, he conjures a massive black sword-like blade of dark magic energy in his hand and unleashes it upon the knights. A terrifying purple explosion erupts, and in the very next moment, all the knights are left biting the dust. The boy is panting heavily, his face covered in bruises. Behind him float three large, terrifying eye-like manifestations of dark magic. Just then, a red-haired female knight arrives. Her face is etched with anger and disappointment. She screams, demanding to know why he made this choice. Why did he make a deal with the devil and betray them, Nox von Reinhafer? Nox simply looks at her, offering a faint smile, and replies that he didn't betray anyone. Rather, they were the ones who betrayed. The red-haired girl, frustrated, tells him to stop arguing and asks, since when did he become so broken? Despite it all, that same pained smile remains on Nox's face. It is then revealed that all of this was merely a part of a game called Inner Lunatic, which our main character, Yu Chan, was playing. Yu Chan is sitting in front of his computer, having just cleared a section of the game. He looks quite happy because he managed to complete the hidden quests as well, but his happiness is short-lived. He glances at his calendar and the harsh reality hits him. He is going to die next month. The story flashes back 2 years. Yu Chan is sitting in a doctor's cabin. The doctor tells him to stay calm, and it becomes clear that he is suffering from an incurable disease. He has made rounds to countless hospitals, but everywhere he goes, he is only prescribed painkillers to manage the agony. Back in the present, Yu Chan is sitting alone in his room. He coughs violently and blood stains his hand. He wonders to himself, is he really going to die soon? He has no one to talk to, no shoulder to lean on. After suffering from memory loss, his life has become utterly lonely. A flyer for a cancer support group lies on his desk, which he crumples and throws away in a fit of anger and despair. Defeated, he turns back to his computer screen. In front of him is the option to create a new character in Inner Lunatic. He enters the name Carl and begins selecting his new character's traits. He chooses Mana Sensitivity Genius and Swordsmanship and Combat Genius. The game warns him that selecting more than one genius trait will result in a penalty. Seeing this, Yu Chan, relating it to his real life, selects a negative trait named Terminally Ill. He chuckles at the dark irony that he is dying in real life, and now his character will be terminally ill too. The moment he starts the game, a strange, blinding light bursts from the computer screen. Yu Chan feels an excruciating pain in his chest. He begins gasping for air, struggling to breathe. He wonders, is this it? Is he dying? A pop-up screen appears, stating that character creation is successful. Yu Chan always thought he wasn't afraid of death, but he didn't want to die like this. The game system shows that the character's name has been forcibly changed, and the synchronization stalls at 71%. The very next moment, Yu Chan opens his eyes in a luxurious royal bedroom. He gets out of bed and looks at himself in the mirror. He is completely shell-shocked because the face reflecting back at him isn't his own. It is the face of Nox von Reinhafer, the worst villain of Inner Lunatic. The same white hair, the same purple eyes. He remembers that Nox was the youngest child of the Reinhafer family and the only one who possessed absolutely no talent for magic or swordsmanship. Because of this lack of talent, he grew to hate the world and eventually signed a contract with the devil, an act strictly forbidden in the game's lore. This was exactly why he became the game's ultimate villain. But now, Yu Chan himself had become Nox. Yu Chan, who is now Nox, starts to wonder if all this is just a dream. Suddenly, a floating stat window appears before him. It displays his age as 14 and his main element as darkness. But the worst part is that his stamina is a mere 2. He notices that his negative traits include terminally ill, curse of the weak, and frequent sickness. Seeing this, a wave of panic hits him. After facing it in real life, he would now have to live as a terminally ill character in this game as well. He realizes that he brought this upon himself. He deliberately created a character who was just as lonely and as close to death as he was. Just then, a new system prompt appears, notifying him of an unread mail in his mailbox. Nox reaches out his hand to touch the floating window. As soon as he does, a series of new messages suddenly pop up on the screen. Reading them, Nox's eyes widen in sheer disbelief. Displayed clearly on the window are the words, "Hey Yu Chan, no, I guess I should call you Nox now." Reading this blows Nox's mind. Deeply shocked, he wonders how on earth the system knows his real name. Then another message flashes on the screen. Yu Chan, a name that has lingered in my memories. Seeing this, thousands of questions start racing through his mind. He asks himself, does whoever sent him into this game know everything about his past? The same past that he himself has forgotten due to his memory loss. Before he can even begin to solve this puzzle, another message appears on the system window. It's been a long time since we met. Reading this, Nox gets even more confused and a bewildered what escapes his lips. Then comes the next message. You have done a great job over the past 2 years. You deserve to be here. And in the very next moment, a massive prompt screen unfolds before him with huge letters that read, "Welcome back." Staring at this strange and mysterious message, Nox is completely paralyzed with shock. His mind goes blank, and as he stares blankly at the screen, he is left with only one question. Welcome back, welcoming me, but to where exactly? The system immediately answers his question. New messages flash on the screen, informing him that he is no longer in his old world. Instead, this place is now his new reality. The system further adds that while there is much about his identity it cannot reveal at the moment, it definitely wants to help him. A clear instruction appears on the system screen: join the Eldin Academy, build your strength there, and try to follow the game's main story exactly as it is. When the time comes, the whole truth will reveal itself to you. Reading this, Nox gets a bit annoyed. He asks in disbelief, "That's it, just that?" He calms himself down, gets out of bed, and starts gathering his thoughts. He has just been resurrected as the final boss of the game, Inner Lunatic. But if he follows the game's main story, it essentially means that his eventual death is set in stone. However, none of these facts shake his resolve. Looking into the mirror, he resolves that even though this has now become his true reality, he will never give up hope of regaining his lost memories. He decides that in order to stay alive in this world and survive until the very end, he will follow the main story. And if doing so requires him to truly become a terrifying villain, he is fully prepared for it. Suddenly, a memory from his past life crosses his mind. 2 years ago, he was sitting across from a doctor, being told that he was suffering from an incurable disease. Since that day, his entire life had been spent in the constant fear of his impending death. Thinking of this, a faint smile touches his lips. He tells himself that in reality, nothing has truly changed. Back then, he was destined to die surrounded by illness, and today his character is in the exact same condition. The only thing that has changed is the environment, this new world that he knows better than anyone else. Looking at the system window, he asks for the current date. The screen displays February 4th, 1812. Seeing this, Nox realizes that he has absolutely no time to spare. He takes a deep breath and says with a smirk, "Well then, let my 28th clear attempt begin." The moment he turns the handle to open the heavy door of his room, a sudden sharp shock jolts his wrist, followed by the sickening sound of cracking bones. The system immediately flashes an alert. Negative trait activated. Due to chronic illnesses, you have developed wrist inflammation. Please rest. Seeing this, Nox gets incredibly frustrated. He wonders to himself, is this body really made of glass? Is it truly this fragile? Just then, a young maid outside the room bumps into him in a panic. The glass plate in her hands falls to the floor and shatters into pieces, sending shards scattering everywhere. The maid is terrified. All the color drains from her face, and trembling, she drops to the floor to beg for forgiveness. "Young Master Nox, please forgive me, I made a terrible mistake." Nox observes her closely. Brown hair and light orange eyes. He immediately recognizes her as Rona. She is a mere extra character whom Nox only remembers because in the game she was always badmouthing him behind his back. Right now, however, Rona has tears in her eyes and is genuinely trembling with the fear of death. Nox understands that if he is going to live as a villain in this world, he needs to act the part. With a terrifyingly calm smile, he leans in close to Rona's face and whispers, "I will forgive you just this once, but if you ever make a mistake like this again." Leaving the sentence unfinished, he gives her a chilling glare that is enough to make anyone's soul tremble. Paralyzed with fear, Rona quickly nods in agreement. The other servants and guards standing nearby freeze in sheer terror at this new, intimidating side of Nox. Nox then stands up and asks where she was rushing off to so early in the morning. Still terrified, Rona stammers that she was heading to the practice hall. Nox decides he will go there too and orders Rona to lead the way. The poor girl obediently follows him in tears, entirely convinced that her master is taking her there to beat her mercilessly. As they walk, a serious expression washes over Nox's face. He realizes that right now he has only one primary goal: to stay alive. Having already endured the agony of death and utter loneliness in his past life, he refuses to die again at any cost. He needs to adapt to this new world and this frail body as quickly as possible. But there is still a ray of hope. As a player who had cleared this game 27 times, every single secret of Inner Lunatic is permanently etched into his brain. As he walks, he swipes a finger through the air, pulling up his status window. The greatest feature of Inner Lunatic was its limitless customization. Though typically a player could only select one genius trait, if anyone tried to stack overpowered traits, the game would hit them with severe penalties. But Nox had exploited a loophole in this very system. By burdening his character with terminal illnesses, he bypassed the system's limits and successfully equipped two genius traits. The first was swordsmanship and combat genius, granting him the ability to master swordplay at a terrifying speed compared to any normal human. The second was mana sensitivity genius, elevating his affinity and capacity for magic far beyond ordinary limit. On top of that, he possessed a main character perk like insight, allowing him to view the status windows of others. He also had the master of acting skill, which would be crucial for playing his role perfectly as a villain in front of everyone. Another trait, steel mentality, ensured his mind would remain perfectly calm during any battle. But this overpowered setup came with a terrifying price: his negative traits. Terminally ill meant that right from the start of the game, he only had 1 year left to live. If he couldn't find a cure, death was inevitable. Along with this, countless afflictions like curse of the weak, frequent sickness, and cold hands and feet were eating away at his body from the inside. He was literally a walking hospital. Finally, they arrive at the massive double doors of the practice hall. Rona stands behind him, nervously wondering if her sick and frail master is actually going to enter the practice hall. But Nox takes a deep breath and using both hands pushes the heavy doors open. There's a sharp glint in his eyes now as if his mind is completely made up. He vows to himself that his very first task is to completely uproot and destroy the curse of the weak once and for all. Opening the door the moment Nox steps inside the practice hall, the very first thing he does is attempt to lift an ordinary wooden training sword lying there. But to his dismay, let alone lifting the sword, he couldn't even clench his fist properly. His hands were trembling violently and sweat began to drip from his forehead. He realizes that with this frail body, he wouldn't even be able to swing this wooden sword 10 times. Defeated and exhausted, he collapses on his back upon the floor, panting as he realizes that he is truly in a terrible mess. This so-called curse of the weak was taking a massive toll on his body. Lying on the ground, Nox begins to ponder the history of his family, the Reinhafer household. This family was renowned throughout the world for its swordsmanship and dark magic. The core technique of their swordsmanship was to infuse their blades with dark magic and utterly obliterate their enemies. In particular, the sword of the family head, known as the tyrannical blade of darkness, could turn anything to dust in an instant. But aside from all these terrifying details, there was one huge advantage to this noble family, and that was limitless wealth. The Reinhafer family possessed so much fortune that even a useless youngest son like Nox could live a life of absolute luxury without ever lifting a finger. His father Tio didn't even pay attention to how or where Nox squandered his money. Nox smiles to himself, thinking that he should fully exploit this spoiled rich brat act. Just then a sharp pain shoots through his legs, but he gathers his courage and pushes himself up from the ground. Suddenly Rona the terrified maid arrives carrying a tray with a wooden sword, a towel, and some water. Rona was deathly afraid, wondering if the sick master was actually going to exercise today, or if he brought her here just to beat her. Nox activates his master of acting skill and calls Rona over. He whispers something into her ear that completely blows her mind. She gasps in shock, "What? You want to blow that much money on something so useless?" Before she can say another word, Nox shoots her a terrifying death glare and tells her to keep her mouth shut and do exactly as she is told. Petrified, Rona squeaks, "Yes, sir," and flees from the scene. Nox is pleased to see that his act of playing the villain is working perfectly. Nox knew that by tomorrow, Rona would bring the items he asked for, which would help him fix his stamina problem. He relaxes and starts sipping the tea left there, but just then a deep voice echoes from behind him, "Greetings, young Master Nox." Nox turns around in surprise. Standing before him is the head butler, Rodwell Die Ernart. This bespectacled, mustached man was the chief manager of the Reinhafer estate and a close advisor to Nox's father. He wasn't the kind of person Nox could easily fool with cheap tricks. Nox can't fathom what Rodwell is doing here, because under normal circumstances, this butler never paid him any attention. Rodwell asked what he is doing here, nodding that he should be busy attending to the family head right now. Nox calmly replies that he can mind his own business. Then Rodwell delivers a piece of news that makes the veins in Nox's forehead throb. Rodwell informs him that the master, Nox's father, has ordered that Nox must attend tonight's family dinner at all costs. Inwardly, Nox panics terribly. He still barely knows anything about this family and definitely doesn't want to meet that terrifying family head today. He tries to make an excuse saying he cannot make it tonight, but Rodwell informs him that the young lady of the Stilliner family has arrived for her night training. If Nox skips this occasion, his father's fury will pierce the heavens. Hearing this, Nox has no choice but to yield and agrees to attend. But the matter doesn't end there. Rodwell's sharp gaze is fixed intently on Nox. He says, "You seem a bit strange today, young master. You never even liked holding a sword, so why did you walk all the way to this practice hall on your own?" Nox realizes that the butler is getting suspicious of him. If he doesn't nip this suspicion in the bud today, it will cause huge problems later on. Nox once again takes advantage of his acting skill. Staring right into Rodwell's eyes, he says in a dead calm yet menacing voice, "Do not try to overstep your boundaries as a mere butler. Why I came here and what my intentions are is none of your concern. I alone will make my decisions." Seeing this suddenly dangerous side of Nox, Rodwell shrinks back slightly. He immediately bows an apology and takes his leave. As soon as he leaves, Nox starts panting heavily and leans against the wall for support. Pulling off this act was incredibly exhausting for his frail body. He knew full well that Rodwell would report this entire exchange to the family head. Nighttime arrives. Inside the luxurious dining hall of the Reinhafer estate, Nox is seated at the grand dining table. Alongside him sit his older twin brothers, Hartz and Alan. The two of them are relentlessly mocking Nox. Laughing, they sneer, "Look, this idiot actually showed up. Looks like tonight's dinner is ruined. You truly are a lost cause." Nox pays no attention to their taunts and sits there quietly. Just then, the massive doors of the dining hall swing open. Accompanied by a terrifying and overwhelming aura, Nox's father, Tio von Reinhafer, enters the room. However, the most attention-grabbing thing was standing right behind him. It was an incredibly beautiful girl with red hair dressed in red and white attire. Tio announces that she is the young lady of the Stilliner family who has come here for her night training. The red-haired girl introduces herself with a very sweet smile. "My name is Talia von Stilliner. It is a pleasure to meet you all." The entire room lights up with her beauty, but on the other hand, the color has completely drained from Nox's face. Sweat is continuously pouring down his forehead and his eyes are wide with shock. He knows that this red-haired girl Talia is none other than the main heroine of the game, Inner Lunatic, the very heroine who is fated to eventually thrust her sword right through the chest of the game's greatest villain, Nox, and bring him to his absolute demise. Nox was sweating profusely. He knew that the beautiful red-haired girl sitting before him, Talia, was destined to be the cause of his death in the future. But before he could shake off this panic, the deep voice of his father, Theo von Reinhafer, sitting at the dining table, commanded everyone's attention. Theo, in a calm yet authoritative tone, declared that the time had come to decide who from the family would go to Eldine Academy next. Hearing this name, Nox's ears perked up. Eldine Academy was the most critical location in the game Inner Lunatic. It was the place where the main story began, and where clashes with enemies and demons took place. Nox thought to himself that if he wanted to maintain the story's structure and gather new friends and allies, he absolutely had to attend this academy. But there was a massive problem. To prevent the nobles from gaining too much influence in the academy, only 3 members from each noble family were allowed to attend. Theo announced that he had already used the first 2 entrance tickets on his 2 eldest sons. Now, the Reinhafer family only had 1 final ticket left. Immediately, the eyes of Nox's twin brothers, Hartz and Alan, fixed on their father. Nox understood exactly what his father was hinting at. Smiling, he asked, "So does this mean you want a competition among us brothers?" Theo nodded in agreement and declared that exactly 1 month from today, a duel would take place in the practice hall to determine who would go to the academy. Hearing this, the twin brothers began mocking Nox. Laughing, they sneered, "How could a weak fool like you, who has never even held a sword properly, possibly face us?" Talia sat there quietly, listening to everything. The brothers' bitter words had no effect on Nox. He calmly picked up his glass of red wine, took a sip, and with a terrifying yet confident smile looked right into his brother's eyes and said, "I am the one who will go to Eldine Academy." Everyone was shocked to see this changed and fearless side of him. His 2 brothers clenched their teeth in anger. But just then, something happened that made Nox's breath hitch. A sweet smile appeared on Talia's face and she said, "It seems the young master is quite confident in himself." Hearing this, Nox's mind went blank. He realized that he had just committed an unforgivable mistake. Unintentionally, he had drawn the attention of the one girl he needed to stay away from the most. After dinner, the scene shifted to Master Teo's office. Head butler Rodwell stood there delivering a report. Rodwell explained that just as he had noticed, there were indeed some changes in Nox. Teo placed a hand on his chin, falling into deep thought. He said that if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes today, he would never have believed Rodwell's words. Teo jokingly wondered if perhaps a demon's shadow had fallen upon the boy. But regardless, the boy had managed to catch his father's attention. Teo ordered that Nox be kept under constant surveillance. A month quickly began to pass. The next morning, the estate maids were gossiping among themselves about how the young master had gone to the practice hall again. They were puzzled. Why was the master only practicing running for a duel that was happening in a month? Outside on the grounds, Nox was running, panting heavily. His clothes were completely drenched in sweat. Suddenly, the system's voice chimed in his head. "Your stamina stat has increased by 0.1. Seeing this, Nox groaned in frustration. Only 0.1. Exhausted, he sat down on the ground and reminded himself why he was doing all this. His greatest asset was his swordsmanship and combat genius trait, but activating this skill required a minimum stamina stat of 4. Currently, Nox's body was so frail that his negative trait, Curse of the Weak, had halved his growth rate. This meant he had to work 4 times as hard to achieve what an ordinary person could learn in a single day. Nox figured that no matter how hard he worked, this disease trait would ensure his stamina never exceeded 15. However, he decided to worry about that later. He returned to his room. Rona was standing there with a trolley carrying all the items Nox had ordered the previous day. Nox noticed that Rona had worked faster than he expected. On the trolley lay 4 strange and dangerous items: the poison of the 3-headed gorgon, a highly lethal toxin; the dew of the remembering fairy, the core of the golem, a rock-hard core; and a rapid stamina growth scroll. In a trembling voice, Rona asked why the master needed all these things. She pointed out that the poison was extremely dangerous and people usually stayed away from it. To her, only the stamina scroll seemed somewhat useful. Nox laughed and said that people thought these things were useless because they didn't know how to use them properly. Confused, Rona asked, "Use them." What Nox did next made the ground beneath Rona's feet slip away. Nox picked up the bottle of the deadly gorgon poison, brought it straight to his mouth, and chugged the whole thing. Terrified, Rona screamed, "Young master, what are you doing? That's poison. Even a single drop can kill a person." Sharp pain suddenly shot through Nox's chest and he began coughing violently. A system screen flashed before him. "You have consumed the poison of the 3-headed gorgon. Your health will temporarily increase by 1.5 times, but your death counter now begins." A timer for 9 minutes and 59 seconds started ticking down on the screen. Crying, Rona turned around to run and fetch the head butler, but Nox, enduring the pain, raised a hand and ordered her to stop right there. Before Rona could comprehend anything, Nox grabbed the rock-hard golem's core from the trolley and bit directly into it, chewing it like an apple. Seeing this, Rona's eyes bulged and she pulled at her hair, screaming, "Cores aren't meant to be eaten." The system immediately warned him that consuming a golem's core would slowly turn his body to stone. But then, a miracle occurred. A new message popped up on the system's screen. "A hidden piece has been activated." Normally, a golem's core was used to turn people into stone or create artificial golems. However, when consumed along with the gorgon's poison, the two combined to create a special effect that completely neutralized the poison. A spark of victory lit up Nox's eyes. A golden message flashed on the screen. "Trait negative, Curse of the Weak has disappeared." Nox exclaimed. Perfect. He could feel the sudden surge of strength rushing through his body. The curse that had been suppressing his growth was gone forever. Poor Rona, on the other hand, was beside herself with fear. Holding both her cheeks, she watched, convinced that the master standing before her was going to agonizingly drop dead any second. Then Nox turned to her and said, "But now, there is one final step left." Saying this, Nox suddenly placed his hands on the collar of his white shirt and began unbuttoning it, one button at a time. Seeing this, Rona panicked completely. Rona covered her eyes with both hands in embarrassment and fear, screaming loudly because she was convinced her master had completely lost his mind. But Nox wasn't paying any attention to her. He immediately grabbed the bottle of dew of the remembering fairy from the trolley and poured it directly over his head. As the glowing droplets fell upon his head, the system screen flashed once again. A message appeared stating that the fairy's dew had reacted with the golem's core, and the side effect that turns humans into stone had been completely neutralized. A sly smile spread across Nox's face. This was exactly what he wanted. The very next moment, the system dropped another bombshell. A hidden piece was activated, and the system announced that Nox had acquired a new trait called the Blessing of Growth. This was no ordinary trait. With its help, until Nox's stamina reached level 5, his growth rate, the speed at which he gained strength, would be double that of an ordinary person. But Nox wasn't done yet. He said, "Now just one last thing remains." He picked up the rapid stamina growth scroll from the trolley, an item most people considered useless, and tore it open to activate it. The scroll's magic seeped into his body, and the system confirmed that his stamina growth rate had multiplied even further. Nox took a deep breath. He had broken his curse, suppressed his illness using the Blessing of Growth, and accelerated his growth with the scroll to such an extent that he could now build stamina multiple times faster than any normal human. Everything had gone exactly according to his plan. Before he could process his next move, Rona came crying and threw her arms around him in a tight hug. She was sobbing uncontrollably, her tears soaking his clothes. Crying, she shrieked, "Young master, are you alright? Why did you suddenly take off your clothes? I thought your brain had completely broken." Mildly annoyed, Nox called her an idiot and told her to stop crying and fetch him a towel. But deep down, Nox decided that since his curse had been lifted today, he would go a little easy on the poor maid. Wiping away her tears, Rona asked if he was really okay and if she should call the head butler. Nox refused, smiling as he assured her that everything was fine. Puzzled, Rona asked what he was going to do next. Adjusting his clothes, Nox flashed a confident smile and said, "I'm going for a run." The very next scene cuts to a bright, sunny day outside where Nox is running laps around the training grounds, panting heavily. Sweat is pouring down his face, but he shows no signs of stopping. Rona is running right behind him, holding a towel. From a window in the mansion not too far away, Talia and her maid Emma were watching this entire scene unfold. Emma expressed her confusion, wondering why someone so weak would even accept a challenge to fight against his powerful brothers. Talia, however, was silently glaring at Nox. Anger and irritation were clearly visible on her face. She muttered to herself, wondering what kind of idiot he was. He hadn't picked up a sword even once. The other knights of the Reinhafer family had offered to train him, but he rejected them all. And now, he was just running around in circles like a maniac. In the duel a month from now, he would be beaten to a pulp and it would all be over. Yet, Talia couldn't understand why this was bothering her so much. Unable to hold back any longer, she abruptly turned around and stormed out of the room. Emma tried to stop her, but Talia wasn't listening to anyone. Nox finished his run and stopped. His breathing was heavy, and he was just about to sit on the ground when Talia suddenly appeared and stood right in front of him. She had that radiant, main character smile on her face. Enthusiastically, she said, "Hey, my name is Talia." Seeing her, Nox panicked internally. He wondered why on earth she had approached him, but keeping his face completely composed, he asked in a very dry and cold tone, "What do you want?" Taken aback by his cold response, Talia paused. She wondered why he spoke to her so rudely, but then she convinced herself that he must be shell-shocked by her beauty. Leaning in slightly, Talia asked, "I need to ask you something. Can you really beat your brothers? Is that why you accepted the challenge? Just by running like this, do you honestly think you have any chance of defeating them?" Even Rona, standing behind him, nodded in agreement with Talia's words. With a sweet smile, Talia placed a hand on her chest and declared confidently, "If you ask me, I am ready to help you." Nox stared at her and without a second thought flatly replied, "No, I refuse. I'm not interested, so get lost, alright." Hearing this, Talia's mind was blown. Her face turned red with anger and she yelled, "How dare you? I came here to help you and you speak to me like that. If you talk like this, girls will hate you." Stomping her feet in a rage, she screamed, "Forget it, do whatever you want," and stormed off. Poor Rona stood behind him, trembling with fear. As soon as Talia left, Nox breathed a sigh of relief. He muttered that she had just made things way more complicated. He immediately swiped a finger in the air and used his insight skill on Talia. Her status window appeared before him. Age 14, main element fire. But as soon as Nox looked at her stats, he was floored. Talia's stamina was 6. Nox realized that in the game Inner Lunatic, a normal adult man's stamina was 4, and this girl already had a stamina of 6. She was truly nothing short of a monster. Nox recalled that according to the game's story, Talia would grow even stronger, and eventually she would be the one to use white flames to burn the game's final villain Nox to ashes. Nox reasoned that if he befriended Talia, the game's main story would completely completely derail, making his survival even more difficult. Besides, how can you be friends with the person destined to be the cause of your death? Time flew by, and the 1-month period quickly passed. Inside the mansion's practice hall, Talia was practicing her swordsmanship. Her moves were so fast and precise that all the knights watching couldn't stop praising her. They remarked that Talia was truly bringing glory to the Stillreiner family's name, but Talia wasn't paying attention to their praises. Exhausted, she walked away and stood by a window in the mansion. Holding a broken wooden sword, she stared out at the sky, wondering if she could truly become a great knight. A true knight must always sacrifice for others, always walk the path of truth. Just then, her thoughts drifted back to Nox. She asked herself if that boy, just by running and without ever holding a sword, could really defeat his powerful brothers who had been training for years. Taking a deep breath and looking up at the sky, Talia whispered, "I don't think it's possible under any circumstances." The next day arrived. It was the day everyone had been waiting for. The massive arena in the middle of the estate's sprawling grounds was bathed in bright sunlight, ready for the life and death game about to take place. Two figures stood on opposite sides of the arena. On one side was Nox's older brother, holding a heavy sword and wearing a confident smile, and right across from him stood Nox, his face completely calm and serious. In the grand balcony overlooking the arena sat the entire Reinhafer family and special guests. Nox's father, Theo von Reinhafer, sat there with his first wife, Facilia. Head butler Rodwell stood behind them, and Talia along with others were also present in the balcony to witness the duel. Everyone's eyes were glued to the two brothers standing in the arena. Without any emotion, Theo asked his butler, Rodwell, "What are your thoughts on this duel? Who will win?" But before Rodwell could answer, the referee standing in the grounds shouted at the top of his lungs, "Everyone, please pay attention. The official duel to decide who will go to Eldine Academy begins now." The moment the duel was announced, Nox's older brother raised his sword in the air, let out a terrifying battle cry, and charged at Nox with all his might. Bloodlust filled his eyes as he leaped into the air to launch a deadly strike. On the other side, Nox stood perfectly still in his place. There was no fear in his eyes. Instead, there was a glint that suggested he had already fully prepared for his victory. Just as Alan's sword slices through the air with full force and descends upon Nox, Nox intercepts that terrifying attack midair with his sword. A loud clang echoes throughout the entire arena. As their swords clash, Alan laughs and mocks Nox. He sneers, "Why don't you just give up? I admit you are a stain on this family's name, but at the end of the day, you are still my little brother. I won't beat you up too badly." But instead of fear, a cunning smile played on Nox's face. Using his insight skill, he had already seen that Alan's stamina stat was 8, which is double that of an ordinary human. Provoking him, Nox replies, "Looking at your attacks, it doesn't seem like you plan on holding back. And to be honest, I want to impress that beautiful girl from the Stillreiner family, Talia. I am absolutely sure you will help me with that." Hearing this, Alan's anger skyrockets, as he too had a soft spot for Talia in his heart. Blinded by rage, Alan increases both the speed and power of his attacks. He relentlessly unleashes a barrage of heavy strikes on Nox. Nox uses all his strength to deflect the blows, but Alan's brute force forces him to slide backward. With a powerful impact, Nox is pushed back, skidding across the ground and panting heavily. In this difficult moment, Nox is reminded of the grueling training from the past month. Even after constantly sweating blood and tears, his stamina stat had only reached 3.8. He recalls how one day while running, he checked his maid Rona's status and was left utterly shocked, because even that timid, ordinary maid had a stamina of 4.5. Nox frustratedly wonders to himself, what on earth is wrong with the people in this Reinhafer family? If a mere maid is stronger than him, how is he supposed to defeat this monster Alan, who has 8 stamina? Meanwhile, the perspective of the people sitting in the grand balcony above the arena was completely different. Alan's biological mother, Lady Facilia, was smiling proudly, watching her son dominate the fight. She was secretly thrilled that the last child to go to Eldine Academy would be her son Alan, and to them, Nox was nothing more than trash anyway. On the other hand, head butler Rodwell leaned towards Master Tio and asked, "Should we stop this duel right here? If it continues like this, young Master Nox will be severely injured, and it will take him a long time to recover." But there was a strange calmness on Master Tio's face. He carefully observed the ongoing fight in the arena and realized that while Alan's swordsmanship certainly had power, it lacked true capability when compared to his eldest son, Garen. Rodwell's old words echoed in Tio's mind. A true knight is not one born of mere hard work, but one born with overwhelming talent, power that can bring an enemy standing before them to their knees in a single strike. Tio was simply waiting silently for the extraordinary to unfold. Down in the arena, Alan had completely overpowered Nox. He laughed loudly and said, "Did I hit you on the head a little too hard? I think you might feel better if I beat you up a little more." Hearing this, Nox gritted his teeth. He knew that if he lost here, he would have to forfeit everything. His chance to attend Eldine Academy would be ruined, and his death in a year would be guaranteed. But if he won, everything in this world would be at his feet. And then, at the perfect moment, a miracle happened. The game system screen flashed before Nox with a sudden, blinding light. The very thing Nox had been eagerly waiting for finally activated. The screen displayed, "Traits swordsmanship and combat genius has been activated. Reading this, a terrifying, confident smile spread across Nox's exhausted face, a smile that made even the attacking Alan hesitate for a split second. Alan yelled, "Have you lost your mind? Why are you laughing while staring death in the face?" But Nox, without uttering a single word, made his final and most lethal move. He activated a special skill in the system called Hour of the Genius. The very next second, the entire atmosphere of the arena shifted. A massive, glowing golden clock face, complete with a network of moving gears, manifested on the ground right beneath Nox's feet. Nox calmly said to himself, "The time of a genius and a normally strong person moves completely differently, and this time that has just begun is the time of a genius." Before his eyes, the entire world around Nox seemingly came to a halt. Alan, who had leapt into the air to strike Nox with his heavy blade using all his might, now appeared to be descending in extreme slow motion. Nox's mind was processing everything at the speed of light. He understood that even though the enemy's speed appeared slow, moving his own body fast enough to capitalize on it was on an entirely different level. Under normal circumstances, taking advantage of this skill would be impossible. But because his swordsmanship and combat genius trait had fully awakened, his frail and sickly body was matching the speed of his mind without a single hitch. Alan's sword was just inches away from touching Nox's head, but in the next instant, Nox moved out of the way with such agility that Alan couldn't even see him blur. With effortless grace, like a master warrior, Nox pivoted smoothly underneath Alan's slow-motion attack and slipped directly into his blind spot. Alan's brain simply couldn't process this speed, and raw fear and shock now became clearly visible in his eyes. Nox tightened his grip on his sword. His target was wide open right in front of him, and his enemies held their breath. Standing right in the center of that golden temporal gear, Nox confidently said to himself, "This duel, I am the one who will win it now." Just as Nox stood in the center of that golden time gear, preparing to launch his final and fatal strike, his eyes suddenly caught sight of the game system. A glowing golden hourglass was spinning right before his eyes. The system issued a stark warning. This miraculous skill, Hour of the Genius, had a strict limit of exactly 5 minutes. If he used it for even 1 second beyond that limit, the consequences would be catastrophic. Nox stopped immediately. He realized he had absolutely no time to spare. If he fought Alan and Hearts one by one, this special skill would run out midway. Therefore, even with his target right in front of him, Nox swung his sword in the air and with a cunning, arrogant smile looked at both his brothers and said, "I have been going a little easy on you guys so far, but honestly this is getting really boring. Big brothers, let's finish this game quickly." Alan and Hearts glared at him furiously. Then Nox raised his head and looked straight up at the grand balcony where his father, Tio, was seated. He said something that brought absolute silence to the entire arena. "Father, please grant me permission to fight both my brothers at the same time. I will fight them together." Hearing these words, everyone present froze like statues. Talia, the other guests, and even his own brothers in the balcony were astounded. Head butler Rodwell stepped forward, his eyes wide, and whispered to Master Tio, "Master, his aura and his confidence have completely changed. It seems as though a grand scheme is brewing in his mind." Tio, with a calm smile on his face, replied without hesitation, "Very well, I allow this 2-on-1 spar." Upon hearing this permission, Nox's stepmother, Lady Facilia, shot up from her seat in a mix of anger and panic. She couldn't understand where her most useless son was getting the audacity to think he could defeat both of her powerful sons simultaneously. Down in the arena, Hearts was going mad with rage. Swinging his sword, he yelled, "How dare this trash mock us like this in front of Father? Alan, get ready." The referee raised his hand and a booming voice echoed, "Begin." The moment the announcement was made, the two powerful brothers, Hearts and Alan, charged at Nox together like bloodthirsty beasts. They launched a full-force, pincer attack that no ordinary human could hope to evade. But the very next second, a sharp clang rang out. Nox, without moving a single step from his position, effortlessly blocked their terrifying duel attack midair with his simple wooden sword. A system screen flashed before Nox. "Due to the special effect of Hour of the Genius, your mastery of the Dark Family's low-grade swordsmanship has increased." Reading this message, a sinister smile crept onto Nox's lips. He said, "Excellent, now your swords and your moves are perfectly clear to me." And in the very next second, a storm hit the arena. With his new power-up, Nox unleashed havoc upon both brothers. His sword moved with the speed of lightning. Hearts and Alan, who were full of arrogance just moments ago, were now struggling just to survive Nox's relentless and lethal attacks. Panicking, Hearts yelled, "Alan, hurry up and attack from his left side." But before Alan could get there, Nox spun around, deflected Hearts' sword with a powerful strike and said coolly, "Didn't I tell you not to let your attention wander during a fight?" Everyone standing in the balcony held their breath, staring at this bizarre miracle. The guests whispered in astonishment, "What on earth has suddenly happened to the biggest disgrace of this family? How did his swordsmanship change so drastically?" Talia, clutching the window tightly, couldn't take her eyes off this new Nox. Nox was now fully enjoying the game. He had exhausted both brothers so much that their hands were trembling. Nox thought to himself, just the feeling of holding and swinging this sword is so thrilling. And then, with a final, full-powered strike, Nox executed a terrifying sweep with his sword. The sheer force of the blow knocked the swords right out of both brothers' hands, sending them flying through the air before they crashed violently into the dirt. Groaning in pain on the ground, Alan yelled furiously, "Damn it!" Fear and the despair of defeat were evident on his and Hartz's faces. Meanwhile, astonishment flickered in Master Tio's eyes as he watched his two eldest sons biting the dust like this. Just then, a sharp sound echoed in Nox's ears. Ding! A purple system screen appeared before him reading, "Hour of the Genius has ended." As soon as the skill deactivated, Nox stood there panting heavily. His entire face was drenched in sweat, but his smile remained. He thought to himself, "Ha, thank goodness." It ended right before the time limit. From the balcony, Lady Facilia screamed, "Hearts! Alan!" She had completely lost her composure seeing her powerful sons in such a state. Nox casually turned around, looked at the referee, and asked coldly, "Hey, the winner has been decided, right?" Trembling with fear and stuttering, the referee shouted loudly, "Absolutely, the winner of this duel is young Master Nox von Reinhafer." Following this grand and seemingly impossible victory, Nox quietly looked at his father, gave a slight, respectful bow, and silently walked out of the arena alone. Watching Nox leave like that, Talia grew restless. Backing away nervously, she muttered to herself, "No, I have to meet Nox right now." Saying this, she quickly left the balcony and ran after him. Meanwhile, outside the arena on a completely deserted path, Nox was walking while leaning against a wall. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his chest as if someone was tearing his soul from the inside. He bowed his head towards the ground and began coughing violently. When he removed his hand from his mouth after coughing, the ground beneath his feet seemed to slip away. His eyes widened in shock because his entire hand was covered in blood. Panicking, he stared at it. "Is this blood?" The next second, the system screen flashed before him. What Nox feared had come to pass. The system alerted, due to exceeding the duration of the skill Hour of the Genius, a terrifying recoil debuff has been activated. Because of this recoil, 2 days and 17 hours have been permanently deducted from the player's remaining lifespan. Nox, panting heavily, struggled to keep himself from collapsing to his knees. This was the most terrifying aspect of this powerful skill. Not only was his lifespan already short due to his terminal illness, but this side effect was going to reduce it even further while making him even sicker. "Damn it, I'm already terminally ill and dying," Nox groaned in frustration. "Thank goodness no one saw me in this state. If the others found out I was coughing up blood, they would permanently cancel my admission to the academy, and I did all this just for that ticket." Nox wiped the blood from his hand and tried to steady himself, but then, from right behind him, a familiar voice called out, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Deeply startled, Nox spun around. There, standing in the sunlight, was Talia. She was panting from running, and clear concern was visible in her large, beautiful eyes. Approaching him hesitantly and fearfully, Talia asked, "Were you injured during the spar?" Seeing Talia suddenly standing there, Nox quickly hid his blood-stained hand behind his back. Fear and despair rushed through his mind all at once. Gritting his teeth in irritation, he lowered his head and cursed furiously in his mind. "Damn it!" Inwardly, Nox was cursing his luck that out of all places in this massive estate, Talia had to show up here at this exact moment. He could not, under any circumstances, let his father, Master Tio, catch wind of the horrifying toll that miraculous swordsmanship had taken on his body. Talia stared at his weak and frail body in sheer disbelief and muttered to herself, "You won that duel in this condition." The next moment, her face flushed red with embarrassment, and she said regretfully, "I think I completely misunderstood you." In truth, Talia had been keeping a close eye on Nox for the past month. She had seen how on the first day he couldn't even hold a sword properly. She couldn't understand how a person the entire world mocked had suddenly defeated both of his powerful brothers in a duel. Her mind had arrived at only one conclusion, that Nox was not a useless person, but rather, he had hidden his true strength from everyone and pushed his body beyond its absolute limits to win that fight. In Talia's eyes, Nox was no longer a lazy villain, but a sickly yet hardworking hidden genius. Just then, the pain in Nox's chest flared up again and he began coughing violently. Panicking, Talia immediately rushed toward him. "Are you okay?" As she reached her hand out to him, a sharp sound echoed. Nox coldly slapped her hand away. His purple eyes held a chilling, terrifying glare. Looking straight into her eyes, he said in a deep voice, "Don't touch me." Talia shrank back for a moment. Before Nox could even think of an excuse to get out of the situation, Talia started apologizing on her own. Hesitating slightly, she said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were this serious about swordsmanship. I heard your body has been frail since childhood, which is why you only did stamina training for the past month. Pretending to be trash couldn't have been your true intention." Nox was utterly confused. He wondered to himself, what on earth is this girl talking about? How is he supposed to respond to this? But then he remembered that Talia's character in Inner Lunatic was exactly like this, a true and honest knight to whom admitting a mistake was of utmost importance. Nox decided to fully exploit this opportunity. Turning on his acting skills, he feigned a slightly sad expression and said, "If that's what you think of me, then please don't tell anyone you saw me coughing up blood here." Talia immediately nodded and said with full conviction, "Absolutely not, I won't tell a soul." Seeing that his plan worked, Nox quietly walked away. Talia stood there, watching his back as he left. A gentle breeze blew and Talia's heart suddenly started beating faster. Her face was completely red, as if a newfound respect and feeling for Nox had just blossomed in her heart. The scene shifts to Master Tio's office. Tio was sitting in his chair with a cunning smile on his face. He said to his head butler, Rodwell, "Looks like my hunch was absolutely right. What are your thoughts on Nox's talent?" Rodwell bowed slightly and replied, "At first, I didn't understand why he let himself get beaten at the beginning of the duel, but considering the children of his age, I think he is the most exceptional among them all." Tio agreed. He felt that there was still much about Nox that he was keeping hidden from everyone. He immediately ordered Rodwell, "Keep a close eye on his every move. No matter what he does, just observe him silently." After Rodwell left, Tio walked over to the window and looked up at the sky. Suddenly, he clenched his right fist tightly. A strange sense of anxiety flickered in his eyes as he whispered to himself, "I don't have much time left." It was nighttime and Nox was alone in his room. Suddenly, the system screen opened before him with a miraculous purple glow. A barrage of messages appeared. "You have completed the tutorial quest. You have cleared the win your first fight quest. And the best part, you receive 3 stat points as a reward." Seeing this, Nox's eyes lit up with joy. A sly smile crept onto his lips as he exclaimed, "Jackpot!" His excitement stemmed from the fact that despite running like a maniac for the entire past month, he had barely managed to increase his stamina by 2 points. But now, he had received 3 points straight away without doing anything. But Nox had no intention of wasting these points on his weak stamina. He opened his status window, which displayed his mana at 9, will at 10, and charm at 25. Without a second thought, he dumped all 3 stat points into luck, instantly raising his luck to 10. Nox chuckled, nodding that an inner lunatic. Luck was the most valuable and overpowered stat because everything else could be improved with hard work but not luck, and he was about to test this luck right now. The next moment, the system screen flashed again. "You receive a special veteran reward for mass clear 27 times. A random gacha voucher and a one-time skill confirmation voucher appeared in his inventory. Nox immediately used the gacha voucher. A massive gacha machine, radiating a miraculous glow, materialized in his room. Greed and excitement filled Nox's eyes. According to the game's rules, rewards were divided into 4 ranks: white the worst, silver, gold, and rainbow the most powerful. Nox calculated that with 10 luck, he had a 95% chance of getting at least a silver or higher. He forcefully pulled the machine's lever. The balls inside the machine began spinning rapidly. With a jolt, a single ball dropped out. As the ball opened, a blinding golden light filled the entire room. Nox jumped with joy because it was a gold or advanced rank reward. The system announced that he had acquired an advanced trait called Supreme Ruler's Awe. It was a terrifying active skill that, upon activation, reduced the overall strength of any enemy within range whose total stats were lower than Nox's by 20%. It was a debuff skill fitting for a final boss. Even though his stats were currently low, this skill would eventually become a nightmare for his enemies. But the real game was yet to begin. The system then asked if he wanted to use his one-time use skill confirmation voucher. This was a mysterious item that allowed him to select and acquire any one skill from the game with absolute certainty. Terrifying confidence settled in Nox's eyes. He stated that he had already decided exactly which skill he was going to take. There was a hidden power within the Reinhafer family, a hidden piece, which was absolutely crucial for his survival. Nox began planning his next moves in his head. Tio was soon going to gather all the children of the family at the estate, and at that time, his biggest problem would be his second eldest brother, Garen, who had gone on a journey to become a blessed knight and would be returning soon. Garen wasn't like his other 2 foolish brothers. He was genuinely powerful. Nox breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that at least he didn't have to worry about the beautiful heroine Talia anymore. She had come to help him, and now that things were clear between them, she wouldn't even come near him. The next morning, Nox stood at the door of his room. He had prepared himself and was thinking about how everything was going exactly according to his plan. But the moment he opened the door, the ground beneath his feet slipped away. Right in front of him, standing outside his door, was Talia. Her red eyes held such stubbornness and obsession that Nox's mind went completely blank. Before Nox could even comprehend what was happening, Talia pointed a finger right at him with a sense of entitlement and shouted, "Tell me, how did you become so powerful so quickly?" Nox stood there, frozen like a statue. The heroine he had planned to get rid of had now drawn even closer to him. Talia stared intently at Nox. Stepping forward, she demanded that he at least have a sparring match with her, or simply tell her what kind of secret training he did all alone. Nox stood perfectly still. He knew that, according to the game's storyline, Talia's character was constantly trying to surpass her powerful older sister and prove her worth in her eyes. Nox took a cold breath, looked her straight in the eyes with absolute indifference, and said, "Before asking me such things or wondering how you should be training yourself, you should first think about the talent that lies within you. Stop comparing yourself to others." Nox's words struck Talia right in the heart. She was deeply taken aback. Her face turned as red as a tomato out of sheer embarrassment and fear. Stuttering, she tries to stop Nox. Without pausing for even a second, walked past her, leaving her standing there alone. Walking Walking down the corridor, Nox breathed a sigh of relief and thought to himself, thank goodness, she won't follow me now. I am on my way to get my next biggest hidden piece, and at a time like this, I absolutely don't want this girl lingering around me, because she is the one destined to take my life in the future. The scene shifts and we arrive straight at the grand stables of the Reinhafer family. This place was renowned across the entire continent for breeding the finest horses. Bathed in sunlight, Master Tio, his head butler Rodwell, Knox, and his twin brothers Alan and Hartz were gathered there. Master Tio announced in a highly authoritative tone, from now on, you all will choose a horse that will remain your lifelong companion. Knox understood just how crucial this segment was in the inner lunatic game. Horse riding was taught at Eldine Academy, and in the terrifying battles to come later in the game, these animals would be their greatest allies. Magical transportation was so expensive that not everyone could afford it. Therefore, choosing a superior horse was absolutely vital for his survival. Tio said, since Knox won yesterday's duel, he will have the right to choose his horse first. Hearing this, both his brothers ground their teeth in anger but couldn't utter a word. Knox calmly stepped forward. There were magnificent, powerful, and gleaming horses all around, each better than the last. But Knox's eyes showed no interest in those ordinary horses. He quickly swiped his finger in the air, activating his insight skill. Suddenly, his gaze fell upon a dark gray, almost black horse standing in a corner, looking quite frail. However, as soon as the insight system flashed its details, Knox's eyes widened with joy. The system screen read, rank, high, main element, dark, and its breed was obsidian. Knox realized that this was the rarest and most powerful beast of the dark element. If Master Tio knew its true nature, he would never have left it standing there. However, there was a massive and dangerous catch with this miraculous horse. The system showed a negative trait attached to it, expected death. The horse only had 2 days and 16 hours left to live. Knox smiled to himself, thinking that this trait was even more annoying than his own terminally ill curse. But he wasn't afraid because he knew every secret of the game and exactly how to bring this dying horse back to life. Confidently, Knox stepped forward, placed his hand on the horse, looked at Tio with full assurance and said, I will choose this horse. Hearing this decision, everyone present was shocked. Master Tio's eyes widened in disbelief. He and the others assumed that Knox was perhaps seeing his own frail reflection in that sick and dying horse. Tio believed that Knox had become emotional and deliberately chosen a dying animal just like himself. In a voice filled with anger and disappointment, Tio said, I am giving you one more chance to reconsider, Knox. But Knox stood firm and stated that he had made up his mind. Shaking his head in disappointment, Tio said, I hope you won't regret this decision. Just then, Rodwell stepped forward and said, young master, please choose a name for your new horse. Knox looked into the horse's eyes and with a strange smile said, Carl, I will name him Carl. This was the very same name Knox had used when creating his character in his real life. In the very next scene, Knox did something nobody expected. He took that massive obsidian horse and brought it straight into his luxurious bedroom. Upon entering the room, Knox heard a faint sound. Smiling, he looked behind the bed and said, I know you're there, come out. From behind the bed emerged the terrified maid, Rona, who had been cleaning there. As soon as her eyes fell upon the massive horse, she was absolutely floored. Panicking, she shrieked, Master, why have you brought a horse into the bedroom? Knox gave her a direct order. This horse is sick, and from now on, you will be the one taking care of it. Puffing her cheeks, Rona made a tearful, childish face and complained internally about why she always got the weirdest tasks. But when she looked into the horse's eyes, it seemed to her as though the poor animal was genuinely fighting for its life. Rona's heart melted. She slowly approached the frail horse, gently stroked its head, and asked in a very soft voice, Is your name Carl? Are you hungry? The horse peacefully rested its head in her hands. Standing at the door, Knox watched this scene with a smile. He had chosen Rona because she was a part of his plan. Knox knew that once this powerful horse was healed, the surge in his strength would keep him alive in the terrifying, death-filled world of Eldine Academy, having crossed yet another milestone on his journey. Knox was now fully prepared to face the next danger. 3 days passed by. An eerie silence had settled over Knox's luxurious room, which was suddenly shattered by the sound of Rona weeping loudly. Rona was on her knees on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Right in front of her lay the massive, lifeless body of Carl. Crying, Rona shrieked, Young master, Carl is dead. For the past 3 days, Rona had taken great care of that horse, and seeing him dead like this had completely broken her heart. But on the other hand, Knox stood perfectly still. There wasn't a single trace of sorrow on his face. In his dull and cold voice, he said, I already knew this was going to happen. Carl couldn't be saved. Rona looked at him in shock and grief. Knox continued coldly, Stop crying, you're distracting me, get up and stand quietly behind me. Rona's mind was reeling. She thought her master had truly gone insane. How could a dead horse possibly get better? But looking into Knox's terrifying eyes, she quietly got up and stood behind behind him. Nox reached inside his coat and pulled out an old scroll. There was a strict law in this world that no child under the age of 15 could use mana magic unless they belonged to the imperial family. But Nox couldn't care less about these laws. He thought to himself that he needed to pour as much of his mana as possible into this scroll. Nox placed his hand on the scroll and activated his genius of mana detection skill. The very next moment, a terrifying and glowing purple light began emitting from his hands. The entire atmosphere of the room shifted. A massive magic circle materialized on the floor and purple flames began rising from it. Witnessing this miracle, Rona was petrified and screamed in panic. "Young master, you know how to use mana, but that's illegal." But Nox paid no attention to her words. His entire focus was on the system. He immediately pulled out the one-time use skill confirmation voucher he had obtained from the gacha. Wasting no time, he issued a command to the system. The system screen flashed, displaying, "You have acquired the skill Book of the Dead Necronomicon one-time use." This wasn't ordinary magic, it was black magic. According to the lore of Inner Lunatic, only one family possessed the power to resurrect the dead and turn them into undead, the Marva's family. Even though Nox's Reinhafer family utilized dark magic, they were knights. A non-Marva's player could never use this skill, but this special one-time use voucher had shattered even this rule of the game. A terrifying skeletal hand materialized in the air before Nox, clutching a massive, sinister black book. This was the Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon. The system prompted, "Do you wish to use this magic?" Nox immediately confirmed. The very next second, countless black, shadow-like hands emerged from the purple magic circle. Those terrifying hands completely enveloped Carl's lifeless body lying on the floor and began infusing it with dark magic. But it wasn't going to be easy. Controlling a spell of this horrifying level was taking a massive toll on Nox's frail body. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through Nox's chest, and a stream of blood escaped his mouth, dripping down his lips. His mana was depleting rapidly. He fell to his knees on the floor, panting heavily. Standing behind him, Rona panicked completely upon seeing her master coughing up blood and screamed, "Young master!" But without moving from his spot, Nox, with blood-stained lips, just tells Rona to stay quiet. Nox gritted his teeth and, gathering his final ounce of strength, said, "Just a little more." With all his might, he pushed the rest of his mana into the magic circle. And then, boom! With a blinding flash, large letters appeared on the system screen. "Your pet, Carl, has been resurrected as an undead. Negative trait, expected death, has been permanently removed." From the center of the light, Carl rose to his feet, but he was no longer a sickly horse. A terrifying dark aura emanated from his massive body. Instead of a mane, glowing blue and purple magical flames now burned along his head and neck. His eyes gleamed like a predator's. A triumphant smile graced Nox's lips. He had done it. By breaking the rules of the game, he had made this great dark beast his own pet. Before Nox could say another word, Rona ran over, threw her arms around the terrifying undead horse's neck, and started crying loudly. Sobbing uncontrollably, she began scolding both Carl and Nox. "How could you two be so careless? Carl, I took such good care of you and you just left me." Seeing Rona overreacting like this, Carl made a weird face. Nox chuckled slightly at the scene. He reached out a hand toward Carl and said proudly, "From now on, I am your master." A few more days pass after this event. It was nighttime. Utter silence surrounded the estate and stars twinkled in the sky. Behind the estate, a shadow was moving quietly. It was Nox. To conceal his noble identity, he wore a large black cloak that covered his entire body. In one hand, he held an old map of the estate and its surrounding areas, and in the other, a glowing, magic-infused crystal stone. Walking through the darkness, he closely examined his map. Nox calculated in his mind, "My next target is the Reinhafer family's second greatest hidden piece." The object he was searching for was a mysterious ring. Nox knew that if he found that ring, the effect of his deadly, terminally ill curse, which was constantly draining his remaining lifespan, would be mitigated a little further. To halt this countdown to his death, he needed that ring at all costs. Walking along, Nox's footsteps came to a halt at a place where the path ahead dissolved into a dense forest and black thickets. There was an atmosphere of dread. Just outside the forest stood a broken wooden board bearing a warning in crude handwriting. "Mia's forest? If little children enter, they may lose their way and die. Therefore, no matter what, please do not enter this forest." Nox read the board and a terrifying confidence gleamed in his dull purple eyes. He stared into that dark and horrific forest where stepping inside meant inviting death. But Nox took a cold breath and resolved in his mind that there was no turning back now. This was no longer a game with a restart option. This was his true reality. He rested his hand on the hilt of his sword and told himself one last time, "In this new life, I do not want to die again." And with this unshakable resolve, Nox stepped into the forest of death. So part 1 ends here. Thank you so much for watching this video till the end.